All right. Welcome, everybody. Now that folks are able to join the room, it is so great to be here with you. My name is Will. I'm one of the admission officers here at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. So we are going to talk a little bit about what is a story. I think as I work with people, sometimes I hear the phrase, "Oh, I'm comfortable with my story. I know my story." But what does that even mean? And what does a story have to do with applying to business school? From there, I do have some exercises to get us a kick start. So maybe you are already well in the weeds. Some of these exercises can help you maybe think through things from a new direction, kind of that spirit of innovation. Let's step back, try new things, and see how that broadens our view of stuff. For those of you who might be exploring or aren't sure, I have some exercises for you as well that might be able to help you start to crystallize and give some resolution to the things that you might be hoping to achieve at business school and beyond. After the exercises, we'll be tying it back to your journey. And then I would love to close with some tips, takeaways, especially on that practical, tactical sense, so that while we're also talking about the process, we're thinking about how we can equip you so that you can put your best foot forward. Okay. So, preface, you are going to see and hear a ton of advice out there. And, some of it is well meaning, some of it is also, maybe shrouded in a little mystery. Maybe it's also shrouded in a little bit of misinformation. Take anything with a grain of salt. There is no one right or wrong way to apply to business school. Even the things that I'm sharing with you today, they are not, you know, end of the story rule book of things that you need to do to get into Stanford, but rather some tips, tricks, exercises that you can do to help maybe kickstart your process or get that momentum back if you've run into like some writer's block and need some inspiration. Okay. So hopefully these are tools that you can use to self-coach. One of my other big goals in this role is to help provide the information that you need so that you can put your best foot forward, so that you understand the process, so that we can, embrace kind of this whole journey together. So next up. So what is a story and what does it have to do with the business school application? So at its most fundamental level, I think about the quote unquote story or your personal narrative as kind of the expression of your motivation for business school. Okay. Very open ended. And this is just one interpretation. I know there are many others out there. And even as we head forward, I can only speak on behalf of the things at Stanford. Other schools might have other opinions as well. But again, tool sets and kits to hopefully help you think broadly, think big about this process. So, well, okay, there's a story, there's a personal narrative, but I'm still applying to school. Like, yes, and applying to a professional school is kind of a different, slightly different experience. And I think this is something even I didn't really appreciate until working in this space. For many academic programs, that program and that degree in and of itself is part of the goal. Learning and, in the case of PhDs, creating knowledge and adding to our understanding of the world. For professional schools, think law schools, medical school, business school, you're often attending school towards some goal. So for some application of that learning and knowledge. In our case, it's that realm of business. And I personally think that the term business school is a little bit of a misnomer because we're going to be equipping you to lead in almost any organizational context. Oftentimes it's in the business setting. There are business elements that you might be also able to use in other parts of your life. So it is this broad experience to help you thrive wherever you end up next. So that's kind of how I see it. I know there's a lot of other interpretations of it, but at business school, the horizon's really open for you. You're going to get asked two questions wherever you go, two fundamental questions that we can start with here. So why business school? Why now? And what are your short-term and long-term goals? So I know some of you out there are still working on like figuring out what some of those details are, and that's wonderful. That's what we're here to help you with today. As you take a look at the Stanford application, you're going to notice that we're also going to be asking you to look backwards. What are the experiences you've had? What did you do? Who are you now because of it? One of the philosophies that we hold dear is past, in the application process, especially, is past behavior can be a great indicator of how you might behave or perform again in the future. So, in addition to that projection forward of what you want to do in the future, we also are asking you to look back, reflect, and understand your journey to today. The other piece here is that reflective piece and looking inwards. And I think this is one of those things that when people start the GSB application, they don't always understand um, will happen as part of the journey. So making sure to build in some extra time for that is going to be a key tip that I have, regardless of what stage of application you're thinking in. So let's dig a little bit more deeply. But as we do that, I think there is also that conception. Here you're going to see a lot of squiggles. You often hear of, hey, this is my journey, I feel good about it. The assumption that there is some linear path to business school, when in reality, it's going to be different for everyone. That's where these squiggles come into play. Sometimes there's ups, downs, forwards, backwards. And as you embrace that and understand how that path has shaped who you are, I personally think that helps set you up better, not just for the business school application process, but as you think forward to your career and life ahead. So, okay, some squiggles, some lines. I'm a very visual person. So, what are some other ways to think through this? So, I have, of course, another visual here. So, anchoring on these two questions: why business school? Why now? And what are your short term and long term goals? The story of who you are can take so many directions, but these two will help us figure out, okay, where's a good starting point and who's the audience that we're already starting to think about? Think about this journey as a journey. And that is one of those analogies you're going to hear pretty frequently. And it's the narrative around this journey that we're going to be spending our attention on today. Um, to answer these questions, we're often very focused on just that here and now, that path, that walkway, and maybe that immediate environment that surrounds it. But what happens if the questions are different? What if we're asking you, tell us about a time when? And in the GSP application, you are going to see a couple things like that. There are optional short response questions. Tell us about a time when your background or lived experience influence an interaction you've had, or tell us about a time where you've had impact, right? What are the steps that got you to where you are today? What does that path look like? What was, again, that environment surrounding that journey that informed where you were able to move and kind of flow through life? Okay. What if the question is about what your values or mission? Dean Moss does talk a lot about how there is a body of research out there that shows some of the most successful leaders are those that lead from a place of mission and values. What are yours? Or maybe it's a question about think big, what's out there? What is it that you aspire towards? I think there's some element of aspiration that all of our business schools, regardless of where you're looking, are hoping to inspire and instill and help you bring to life. And so let's lift our head up from that trail to look at that blue sky and think there. And then, okay, lots of different ways we can take that. So as we talk through this, hopefully I'm going to take us away from individual answers as we start to construct your personal narrative to think about the big picture. How do we go from individual questions and answers to understanding here are the connections in my life? If someone asks you to look to the left, the right, up, down, are you going to be able to answer those with detail and feel good about that and come from a place of owning that journey? That is that transition that I hope we're able to make today and really inform the way we think about telling your story moving forward. All right. So, starting your story, what's on your horizon? So, this is where we're looking forward. We're going to look forward and look back during today's session. So, if you haven't done so already, or if you have one handy, I encourage you to find a pen, some paper, or maybe open up another browser window where you can type along. If you don't have any of that handy, just think through things along with us. For those of you who might be watching this on replay in the future, hello from the past, I'll be giving you some cues for times where you might be able to pause so that you can extend the time and customize these exercises to have them work for you. I'll give you some additional cues so you know when to jump back in. But really, I want anybody and everywhere to be able to engage with us today. So let's go to exercise number one. I like to think of this as big dreams, blue sky. So write, think, type along. And especially for those of you who might not know what comes next or are still exploring, thinking through this process, a question that we'll ask you we'll actually ask this, we asked this in our past information session. If there were no preconceived notions of what success look like, if there were no fear of failure, if there was anything you could do in your life, ask yourself, what is it that you really want to do? This will be followed by 2 minutes of free writing. But before we go there, I want to give a little bit more detail here. So when you're asking yourself what it is you really want to do, that doesn't necessarily have to be just a job or a title. Maybe it's an impact. Maybe it is some space in the world that you want to inhabit. You can think about this broadly, and that's where that think big comes into play. But take a moment and jot that down. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. As you figure out what that looks like, add some detail and color to that. Try your best to fill out those 2 minutes to give you as much detail as possible. I'm going to actually hop off screen. I'm going to start that timer, and then so that you won't be distracted by my affirmative bobblehead. So go ahead, put that pen to paper. We have 2 minutes. Ask yourself, what do I really want to do? I will see you in 2 minutes. All right, go ahead and complete those final thoughts. I have been scanning the Q&A box and I will get to that. Today, we are going to be focusing our attention on kind of how do you craft that story? What's the breadth? And we are actually going to be sharing some focus on the essays as well as interviews. And what are some of these other platforms and avenues for sharing your story? What are some of those mediums? Tomorrow, we'll be sharing your story part 2, where we'll talk about the written format, including essays. And then Thursday's event will be in spoken form. So think interviews, networking. So just wanted to share that as we move forward. So let's unpack this exercise a little bit. So I drew a line here so we can think about both the outcome as well as the process. I love it when the image behind just happens to work along with what we're trying to do. With the outcomes, we were thinking blue sky. So let's start there. Was your answer what you expected? I know for some folks who might be entering the space with an idea of what they want to do, um, did it end up being the same thing that you were thinking about earlier? Once you were released of all of those expectations, was there a little bit of extra nuance or depth or this new angle on it that kind of piqued your interest? From here, ask yourself two things, right? Why did you answer this? What is it about whatever it is you wanted to do? What is it that spoke to you? Okay. And from there, okay, how might those things infuse my goals, whether that is career goals, life goals, personal, professional, while at business school? So taking that time to sit back and reflect. So these might be topics you use to journal, have conversation on. But I also want you to think not just about the outcomes, but take a look at that process. One of my favorite questions to ask during exercises like this is, how did that feel? Right? Paying attention to both your body, your reactions. Okay, when was it hard, or where? When or where? Because sometimes there might have been a topic, there might have been a direction. You might have been stymied after you got to a certain point in adding detail. How was it hard? Was it difficult because you couldn't find the words? Was it difficult because you're still learning and thinking through it? All are valid reasons and offer an opportunity for you to think, okay, maybe this is an area to further explore. When might have been easier. And those might be the channels where, that could be a place for you to look at to drive some of these inspirations for what, might be down the pipeline for you. Okay. So we did a little bit of writing, but I know there are folks out there who process in different ways. So we are going to do something else. I like to call this Speak Your Truth, and you might have a little inkling of what it might be given the highlighting in the title. Sometimes it's easier to talk to people. And I know this might feel strange, especially given that we are engaging across potentially continents and seas and sharing space in a virtual setting. And I also recognize that not everybody might be in an environment where they're able to do this. So if you're able to, please join in. If you're not, kind of engage mentally. But what we're going to do is I want you to choose one of these 6 questions, right? My other favorite question is, tell me more. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set another timer for 2 minutes. This time I'm going to stay on screen. It might feel weird, but I encourage you to answer that question to me live. Talk your way through it. We might not know each other kind of personally, but I hope by now you know that I really am kind of here in your best interest. I'm here to support you in the process. And I really do want to get to know you better. So we're about to start. So let me get my timer ready. For those of you who are, again, watching this across time and space, you can watch me. You can put it on pause so you're talking to a static image. Or if you want to challenge yourself, you can set it to pause and use 5 minutes as your time. The challenge here is to use the entire time. You might be surprised as you talk your way through it, what some of the answers and some of the directions you might take. So here we go. Hey, that sounds like a really awesome thing that you want to do. I'm really curious about it. What is it about it that really speaks to you? Can you tell me more? We have about 2 minutes. So yeah, the floor is yours. Keep going. Tell me more. All right. If you have reached the end of your statement, awesome. If you're still finishing up your thoughts, thank you so much for sharing some of your inspiration and the direction you're thinking about what really resonates for you. So, and actually, as we step back from the exercise, I do thank you if you engage with that. I think being able to verbalize and talk your way through things is also going to be one of those really important skill sets that you're going to need to develop and are going to be able to develop both during this application process as well as during your time in business school. It's going to be a skill set that you're going to be using for your entire career and lifetime beyond. So, as we close that exercise as well, think through these same 6 questions. Did the answers go in a direction that you were expecting? Why? Why not? What were the things that spoke to you? How did that feel? Was it difficult? What parts were difficult? And I know for everybody, there's going to be a different comfort level with speaking out loud. So as you use both that written format as well as the verbal format for thinking and processing, I hope you're able to find some happy medium that allows you kind of the most efficacy and kind of blank canvas to paint that big picture of what it means for you. All right. What is it that you really want to do? I think that is a great bottom line question. And now we're going to transition to looking backwards. So we did a little projection forwards. Now it's about looking backwards. And this is one of those pieces, again, to the Stanford application process that will often take a little bit more time than you might expect. So, exercise number 2, I call this centering yourself. So, it's going to be pretty simple. So I want you to complete the sentence. This first part shouldn't take too long, and you'll be able to whiz through pretty quickly. So I am blank. A figure in my life is or was blank. Blank was an important moment or place in my life. So for me, I am a Filipino American. A figure in my life is my friend Zenon. Zenon, if you're out there, hi, hope you're doing okay. And the veterinary clinic that was my first job out of college was an important moment in and place in my life. So hopefully that easy going through and scrolling, just whatever comes top of mind. Okay. This next piece, I'm actually not going to make time bound. The next question and kind of the next step here, I want you to be able to take as much time as you need to explore, think, and process. And that processing is where a lot of the time is probably going to be invested. That processing will include connecting the dots between these blank lines, these 3 words that you filled in, and who are you? So, because of you, I want you to address each one of your answers as if it was a person. So, I am Filipino American. Because of you, because of being Filipino American, I am. Talk about yourself. Think about some of the identities that belong to you, whether it is kind of immediately visible, maybe it's something that is just kind of seen and known by you, maybe it's one of these invisible identities. How does that affect the way you move through the world? When it comes to the people in the space that you're inhabiting, how have they shaped your life? How have the places you've been, the incidents or events, the different things that happen in your life that may be pivotal in shaping the perspective that you're going to bring to business school? What might some of those be? And not just what are they, but really the focus of this exercise is who are you because of them? So this could be a wonderful exercise to do for journaling. Maybe it's something you're talking to friends with. I do want to take a little time out to talk about self-care and mental and emotional well-being, not just for this exercise, but in this application process and in business school. There is going to be a lot of stress as part of this. Part of the hope for application week is to alleviate some of the stress and anxiety, but it is also an inherent part of what we're doing. Take time for self-care. For this exercise in particular, sometimes the answers that you are going to come up with might cause duress. They might be triggering. They might kind of have you exploring in ways where you might need additional support. I really encourage you to kind of prepare for that, take time, and also find the support that you need. If that is professional help, I encourage you to find the tools, resources, and people in your life who can set you up so that you can thrive in whatever settings you're in. So just wanted to take a moment, acknowledge that this can take you in a lot of different directions. We're here for you, and there is help, and we want you to thrive. Now, putting it back together, we're going to come back to your journey a little bit. I know we started with, hey, what is a story? It's the expression of your motivation for business school. And it's a foundation for you to have many connections, build some mini relationships with the different people that you're going to be interacting with throughout this entire journey. That's why today we're stepping back from just the kind of close view of applications, of the essays, to understand the story writ large. Because as you start to move into the written portions and the spoken elements of the journey, you're going to be drawing from this story. You're going to be looking left and right and being asked to identify different parts of that landscape that you've traversed so far and what the future looks like or what you hope it looks like ahead. What is that horizon for you? Through that, one of the most effective ways to connect with individuals, whether it's written or in person or virtually, is to find something in common. And something that each and every one of us has in common is that we have a lived experience. Those experiences might be different, but as you find some of those commonalities, those are the moments we're able to connect. And oftentimes those commonalities are when you're able to dig deeper and really think about, again, and this is going to sound really overarching, but some of these questions will have you thinking about stuff that is inherent to the human condition. I bet you didn't think we were going to be talking about the human condition when I was like, stories and business school applications. And yes, this is a school application, but this is also an opportunity to do a little bit of designing your life, thinking about what are the things that are important for you. How might those guide the next steps, whether that is educational, professional, personal, the intersection of all of those, as well as plot the course that your future might take, right? Let's think big, let's aspire, let's dream. And from there, let's look for the tools and experiences that can help you achieve just those things. Let's celebrate that squiggly line of how you got to today and embrace that squiggly line of exploration, that dotted and dashed line, because that story and that journey, that trail has yet to be blazed. So center yourself in this. All right. And I promise we were gonna do some takeaways, tips, really get into some of the tactical, practical, and we'll transition into the Q&A box from here. And I do apologize ahead of time. You'll notice I tend to shy away from heavy text slides, but here I think it's gonna be helpful for us to have a platform and something to anchor our conversation. So 3 broad themes here I'm gonna talk about. You are the expert in you. Your story is always evolving. And remember, think about it as a story and your story and not a script. Okay. let's dig into these a little bit more deeply. So, I often get asked the question, hey, Will, like, I'm still exploring. I'm kind of not sure what I'm going to do next in business school. Like, how much detail do I need to have in the application? And for the Stanford GSB application, as you're thinking about how much resolution do I need in my goals, you'll notice that the short term, long term goals section is actually pretty short. We're asking you more in our big essays, what matters the most to you and why Stanford. Okay? Maybe your short term, long term goals are implicit and like really like inform why Stanford, but you are the center of that, right? So the only person you need to convince that this is a relevant, meaningful kind of step in your life is you, right? Your answer is the only one that matters. I'm not going to be judging whether or not kind of your path is possible or whether you're going to be hireable or an attractive candidate within any given industry, because we trust that during your time at Stanford, you're going to be equipped to thrive wherever you might end up afterwards. And honestly, you're probably going to end up doing at least one pivot, geography, industry function at some time during business school, and most definitely beyond. We're not going to hold you to anything you write down. And that's where some of that evolving story comes into play, right? Allow yourself to embrace the new experiences that you come to. But as you're going through this, okay, that thing happened in my life, or there's this person. How do I know what content or what topics to bring in? Is there anything that is off limits to talk about in this process? Again, speaking only for the Stanford GSB experience, the answer is no. How I would advise you around this is think about that so what? What is it that you are trying to convey through that example, right? Sometimes the things where your greatest learnings or realizations come from might be something controversial. The ground rule here maybe is speak about it in good taste, provide the detail that is necessary for us to understand it. And if it's something extremely sensitive, you also don't have to say every single detail. We trust you to share what you want with us. I know that sometimes there are analogies out there about your story and it needing to be so deeply personal that you wouldn't want anybody else to see it. That if you printed it out at work, you would run there, grab it off before anybody got there in the morning. Great. I hope there is some kind of connection there. And I don't want you to feel like to have a compelling and kind of meaningful story that you have to have something like that you're hiding or that implies that there's something, that you might be a little embarrassed about. If it's there, let's, and you want to go there, let's do it. But if it's something that gives you joy and you actually talk about it all the time, the way I think about it is as long as you have some connection to that story, as long as there is some feeling that you're communicating when you're talking about, what it is that you really want to do, or, here's how my past informed who I am today. As long as there's that feeling and connection, you are headed in the right direction. When it comes to the balance and space, that's going to be different for every setting you're in. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the other sessions this week. But generally, I would say if you step back and you spent more of that time or written real estate on that person or something other than yourself, you might want to take that editing eye and center yourself back in that. I want to learn about you. I want to know who you are and how you're going to show up in our classroom and community. And so that could be one way to guide you. And you are the expert. You are the one who lived through all of this. And we hope you're able to take maybe some of these exercises we did today to reflect and understand kind of this journey with that much more nuance. I already talked about how your journey is always evolving. Allow yourself to incorporate these learnings into the things that you want to do next. Maybe it just adds another detail and kind of further evidence for that path that you're pursuing. Maybe it's getting you to turn a little bit or kind of look in other directions. I think all of those are powerful, and all of those are things that are going to be important to you and can be guiding principles and ways for you to decide when you have different options, which one might you want to pursue. Remember, reflect, process, connect. Process and connect could be flipped here, but I figured remember, reflect, process, connect sounded a little bit more like I would remember that. So remember the things in your life. Remember the events, people, places, achievements, things that you're proud of. Reflect on that circumstance, right? Not just that event, but how did you feel? What were some of the situations and circumstances surrounding it? That process and connect piece. How did that inform anything else in your life? Are there connections here? Because of that action, I learned. And then, hey, in this other instance, I applied that learning. Or, hey, that was feedback. Now I'm seeing myself in new ways. Now this is changing the way I'm thinking about approaching, maybe this field that I'm interested in. And that all takes time. Be gentle with yourself. Take time for that introspection. Sometimes that introspection can be done with others. It doesn't always have to be solo. Find people that you care about. Also, think about who the mentors, sponsors, and advocates in your life might be so that they can help advise and guide you through this process and give other valuable perspectives coming from people who really care about you. And then remember, it's yours. This belongs to you. I'm trying to get us to think about that big picture, right? Think about that story as something that you're able to adapt and flex to different situations. If you get stuck in a script and we think about it as a script, coming off of that page becomes really hard. But you are going to be in so many interesting, fascinating, and exciting spaces, not just as you apply to business school, but during your time there. People are going to want to learn about you. Building these mini relationships are different ways that you can think about networking or kind of exploring career options, right? So hopefully these tips and little tricks can help you along the way as well. And remember, you don't have to tell the whole story. Earlier, I mentioned, some things we're still processing. We're still trying to figure out how that fits into the shape of me. All right, that's awesome. Take that time. You own this. We want you to tell us what you want us to hear. That's very different from what does Will want to hear? What do I think Will wants to hear? Or what do I think Will wants to read in an application, and shaping your narrative to that? Because you might lose all of the different and kind of beautiful aspects of yourself when you're trying to conform to what you think might be someone else's expectations. Right? You are the one who is able to give us that nuance and detail and insight into who you are. I think this is a detail that I also want to share. Like, yes, there are a lot of people out there, things that say, hey, this is what got me in. And for them, yes, it might have helped them in this journey. This is a holistic review process. So we are looking at everything in context. So, in actuality, that may or may not have been the thing that got them in. Even as we talk to our alumni and our students, as awesome as they are, they don't know why they got in, and they never will. So yes, be inspired, kind of think through, yeah, these are some of the people I could be learning and growing with, and celebrate you, celebrate your journey. They will also be learning from you in turn. No one can tell your story the way you can. Use your words, your language, the way that feels and fits like a good coat, like a good thing, so that when you are submitting that application, you know that you are giving us the fullness of who you are. So with that, thank you. That was a lot of content. I am going to turn to our Q&A box now. I see that there's been a lot of action. My colleagues have been answering questions this whole time. But if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to start my Stanford.MBA account with some quick questions. We're able to help collect events that might be of interest to you, as well as an application tracker to see, just where are you in the process. All right, let's stop share for a minute. And let's go to the Q&A box. All right, so there is a little bit of process question here. So this is from Shen, and it's been upvoted. So a question about the review process. Would there be a group of admission officers reading the same application, or just one officer? I ask this because I believe different people will weigh different values goals differently. For example, an admission officer who is a mother may resonate with a candidate who talks about motherhood better than a non-mother officer. If possible, could you share how you would read our stories to make sure that the personal difference in interpretation would not bias your decision? Thank you for this question. I think this is one of those things that in the admissions process, we take very seriously. A large like bias, yes, is part of being human. It's one of those things that have helped us evolutionarily over history. And we're not in that fight for survival anymore. And sometimes these biases, which may have been helpful in other instances, may actually work against us in the things that we're trying to achieve. And, and in the application review process, this is one where that bias, you're right, it can play a difference. And we do training around that. And so there are going to be multiple readers for all the folks who are admitted, right? We want to make sure that there are eyes on kind of to ensure that we are doing as fair and providing as fair as an assessment as possible. During our trainings, we do these every year. We talk about bias. What are some of the different things that might influence the way you look at an application? Also, it is an evidence-based process. As I was mentioning earlier, there are elements where we're looking at past behavior as a great indicator for how you might behave again in the future. That is one of the things that we're looking at. When we're looking at and saying, hey, here is an instance, here's evidence, that those are the times that we're able to make the strongest cases and we see, hey, yeah, this is why you should be here at the GSB. This is where that storytelling element comes into play. And I say that not as kind of trying to adapt the story to cater to the people in the room, but rather we are thinking and looking for diversity broadly defined. As you are able to talk about who you are kind of to the fullest extent, that's when our readers who are trained to kind of recognize the biases that we have as humans, kind of set that aside and work with and through them to make sure we see, okay, here's the journey for this individual in context. Your journey might look very different from someone else's journey. That doesn't mean yours is any more or less difficult or appealing. It just means they're different. And we want to make sure we're thinking through how you've expressed your voice, talent, and made an impact in those settings. So kind of to summarize that, we take bias very seriously in our evaluation and process. We do have multiple folks who are going to be having eyes on your application as we move through the process. And we really care that we are providing an evidence-based recommendation while we're kind of pulling together and creating a diverse and dynamic class from all types of backgrounds. Okay, here's a question from Freddie about how you should split the essay. Should be 70% personal story and the 30% professional experience? Is there a general rule of thumb? And so we'll talk a little bit more about this in tomorrow's session, but I think as you're trying to think through kind of what elements of your story will now be important, take a look at the question itself, okay? For some schools, there might be kind of a recommendation for how you balance it. At Stanford, there's not. You'll notice that our questions are pretty open-ended. What matters the most to you and why? That does not have to be career or profession related. We're really asking you what matters to you. And not just that, we're hoping that you're doing some of the things we did together today and really dig into the hows and whys to understand kind of the values and perspective that you would bring. So there is no recommended balance necessarily. You will notice that there are questions that are geared towards kind of that professional experience. So the impact questions that are optional, if you aren't already discussing things there, that could be a place where you're talking about work or kind of community or other types of impacts that you might have made in the different spaces you inhabit. So each question might be slightly different, but we are very intentional about the way we word it. So we're not trying to fish for some invisible proportion. We're really asking directly for the things that we're looking for. So hopefully that helps. And again, there's no right or wrong balance. Everybody is going to kind of embrace and engage with these questions differently. And I encourage you to do so, right? Do it in a way that feels right for you. All right, here's a question from Blue Sky. Is Stanford more interested in someone inspired to change the world, or is it equally possible for someone who just wants to live a better life through learning at Stanford? I think this is also one of those nuances. We talk a lot about change. How are you going to like change lives, change organizations, change the world? You know, it's in our motto. I say that that's very aspirational, right? We hope that you're able to dream big, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are looking specifically for folks who are like, I need to go change the world. Sometimes you might just want to change your little corner of it, right? Maybe it's those projects that you're approaching at work. Maybe it is how you are moving through your career and you want to be able to accelerate that and change that trajectory. Those are all equally powerful, relevant, and valuable like rationales for coming to Stanford. And so we don't have a preference for whether you want to change the world or you just want to change the way you kind of see things and kind of shake things up. Your rationale is your own. And I personally encourage you to celebrate and really live into those. Okay. And here's another question about how would you advise on making cliche topics interesting? Um, so, for example, wants to go to Stanford because of the tight knit network. Center yourself. We did a little bit of that as an exercise, but as you think about even things like an answer, maybe family matters the most to you. Why? Why again? What are some of the things that you as an individual have experienced to shape that? I think that question of why is so powerful, and we'll play around with that a little bit more in one of our other workshops. But really digging in and getting deeper, that's where that authenticity piece comes to play. You are the only one who can talk about your life and the nuances of it. And so allow yourself to go there. I think it really does surprise people how like encompassing the journey is and how much we're asking you to think about things beyond just kind of that practical, tactical, this is what I'm going to do with my career, but also here's who I am. And this is how that informs, you know, how I'm going to show up here, there, and any other setting. So I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much. We will be going through these questions and saving a number of them to ask Dean Moss this Friday at office hours with Dean Moss. I think hearing from her is also an amazing way to learn about kind of the philosophy and energy and the spirit of the GSB MBA application review process. So thank you so much for sharing this afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time of day it is. Thank you for spending this time with us. Hopefully you were able to take something useful away. Maybe it was a tip, trick, tactic, new awareness, whatever it may be. I hope to cross paths with you again soon. Until then, thank you again. Stay safe. And here is to creating your story.